Hello, we're John and Elizabeth. We're on board Corrick. We are running straight across the Irish Sea towards Wales. This episode is all about recovery of a man overboard when you're on your own. I hope you find this episode useful. Thank you very much for watching.
Thank you.
It's probably the case that the thing that both of us worry about the most is going overboard. It's almost undoubtedly going to happen in a situation where something else is going on, less than perfect. But we practice our man overboard drills not as often as we should perhaps, but we do practice it, and we had a go at it the other day. And what we'll do is we'll cut this video with little shots of us doing these drills to bring it to life. But we have a 3-stage set of actions that we do, and they are divided up into: number 1, stop the boat and call for help; number 2, maneuver the boat and prepare for recovery; number 3, do the recovery. So, as I say, we'll cut this with little bits of examples, but as the person goes over the side, the important thing is to mark the plot. We're going to do our man overboard drill, and this is the dummy that we have. So here's a big red bright mooring buoy, double tied onto a bucket. Mooring buoy means we can see it. Bucket means it stays exactly in the place in the water, like a person would, without being overly affected by the wind. And here we go. For exercise, man overboard.
First thing I'd do would be to mark the position on the plotter. I'd recommend that you practice this with your own plotter because they're all a little bit different. Press that one. This now gives me the bearing in the range, and I'd now know where to look for the person.
Finding the person is going to be really hard, especially at night, especially in rough weather, without the help of your plotter. Once you've marked the plot, then heave the boat to. For us, that would almost inevitably involve knocking it out of auto and then pushing the tiller away from the boom in order to tack the boat up into the wind, and then as the boat goes through, reversing the helm, so tiller to boom again in order to stop the boat.
Autopilot to standby. Tiller to boom.
The act of heaving to is best done as violently as possible. Push the tiller hard away and then reverse the tiller hard as the boat comes through the wind, and that should slow the boat right down and stop it.
Once the boat is stopped, then go into the mayday call. So we've got a crib down below, give the position accurate to 3 decimal places, and I think that I would almost always follow it up with a DSC, distress message, because that will pass the position.
This is our voice distress message, which is on the bulkhead at the chart table. It is readable from standing in the cockpit, companionway access. You would have to jump down below in order to operate the DSC alarm on the VHF.
Once that's done, take a big deep breath, start the engine, roll up the head sail, and manoeuvre the boat dead downwind, the main absolutely centered. As you do that, that's your opportunity to look for down the bearing given on the plotter for the person and maneuver towards them. If you weren't close enough to get the horseshoes or the Dan buoy in before, that is the opportunity to do that now. As you go downwind, get as close to the person as you can and deploy that equipment into the water or the throwing line in order to grab hold of them. That might make things a little bit easier. If you can't get close to them or you can't deploy the stuff, then you're going to have to go down a little bit further from them, further downwind, then round up into the wind so that the main is flapping away and not pushing you to port or starboard. Motor back upwind towards the person, but at this time what you're doing is you're getting all of your recovery gear ready. The boat hook, the handy billy, the safety knife and the tether.
Having gone downwind and if necessary deployed the throwing line and the horseshoes, etc., the boat then gets turned upwind, and this is the approach for the recovery. Because we're light-handed and we don't have a helmsman and somebody else to go and get things, we have to do this under autopilot. So you have to engage the autopilot, look up to make sure that it's actually going to get you towards the person, get the tether, which is still stowed inside the spray hood, then grab the boat hook, which is on the coach roof. That needs to be then brought back into the cockpit. The safety knife itself is attached to the Dan-buoy cover, so that's fine. And then there's just the handy billy to be got out. But by this stage we're getting quite close to the person, and therefore it's important to take the boat in hand. And what Elizabeth can do is she can see the buoy in the water just there, and she's making an approach. She's probably about 50 meters now, approaching very slowly. You'll see the weight come out of the main sheet now. That is indicating that we're pretty much head to wind, and as described, we would always do the recovery on the starboard side, because as we turn the boat to starboard, any use of a stern power here would kick the stern to port and away from the person.
So at that stage you're all prepared for the recovery. As you make your way into the recovery position, slow down. You don't want to do this too fast. You certainly don't want to hit him or put a bow wave over him. Slow down. Turn the boat in order to position the boat between the wind and the person in the water. In our case, that would almost always be turning the boat to starboard. And there are good reasons for that. The prop lock to port means if we did need to slow down, that would help us square off onto the wind. Once you're alongside the person, use the boat hook to get hold of them, pull them towards the boat. Use the tether to tie them to the boat, and once you've got them tied to the boat, you can then get the main out and use the main as a derrick and use the handy billy in order to pull the body up. As you venture out of the cockpit, it's important not to become another casualty, so absolutely one hand for yourself, one hand for the ship, but use the boat hook to grab probably the life jacket or the harness, and then either using the tether line of the person that's in the water if they have it fitted, or one that we have spare, just hook that person and then hook the person to the boat. That gives you time to do anything else that you might need to do. Very important when light-handed. So Elizabeth has tethered him to the rail, to the jackstay rather, and then got the handy billy out. And like a lot of things, these things sometimes tie themselves in knots. But once you've got them there, what we've got is a couple of snap clips that hook basically onto the very bottom of the boom, just where the main sheet attaches. And that just clips in there, and then there's another clip on the other end that can be attached to the harness that's already attached to the casualty. So once that's then put in place, it's possible to then cut the guardrails using the safety knife just where the ropes are, and then clear all that away and pull in and bring the casualty onto the boat, ideally in a position where they can then be rolled into the cockpit itself. I don't think it's possible to underestimate just exactly how difficult this is going to be with a full set of foul weather gear completely soaking. As the body comes up, then cut the guardrails at the back end using the safety knife in order to reduce the risk, the amount of distance you have to pull them up. Bearing in mind it's likely to be dark, it's likely to be rolly, it's going to be uncomfortable. Once you've got the person in, put them in the cockpit and get them warm as fast as you can. I would then call the Coast Guard and I'd continue, in all likelihood if it was cold, to try to evacuate that person because there was a real risk of hypothermia at this point.
Just to make the manoeuvre really clear, you can be on any point of sail. Very often this will happen when you're going upwind, but it might happen when you're going downwind, might happen with a spinnaker up, any point of sail. But the person goes over the side, and then you're into your drill. So the first thing we want to be then doing, and again, any point of sailing, then heave the boat to. Throw the boat into the wind and put the wind on either sail back to front so that the boat is stopped. Then manoeuvre in order to go close to the casualty and then go downwind with the head sail dropped and the main strapped in to avoid the danger of a jibe. Then when you're far enough away, turn and come upwind, and you'll know that you're upwind because you look at the main and it's fluttering. At that point, you've got all your preparations, then manoeuvre to a position where you're in position for the recovery with the boat between the wind and the casualty. Elizabeth and I did this drill a couple of times each, and this is my example. So the person goes over, then as we described, you mark the plot and you can see, even though it's flickering, that it's giving me the readout, and then it is heave to. So there is the tiller going over towards the boom, and as the boat comes upright, the mainsail flutters and flips onto the other side. I sheet in at that point and then put the tiller back down, and that should stop the boat. Now, in this particular case, we had a full main and a heavy jib, so we were a bit not as slow as we would have been.
Mayday, 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 this is your current But
that situation could easily happen. I then go into the Man-overboard message to the Coast Guard using the handheld VHF and giving the boat's position as accurately as I can.
I have a man overboard. There is one person on boat attempting recovery now.
At this point, I go down below and initiate the distress message on the radio down below.
Flick, press.
So that's the end of the first stage. Come back up on deck, and now it is a case of engine on, and then get rid of the head sail. Now that is pretty straightforward. It is a one-person job. You just need to, because we're hove to, just easing the head sail out will allow us to then roll it up without enormous difficulty.
Sailing away.
As the head sail goes away, I can now put a few revs on and pull the boat and aim down towards the casualty himself. Now, it could be that the casualty is dead downwind, it could be it's off at a little bit of an angle. In this case, we were a bit to port, and therefore move down, but going downwind, get as close to the casualty as you're prepared to do in the weather conditions. What I've done here is, as I see the person looking down the bearing line on the plotter, I line it up with an object. You might not always have this, but I lined it up with an object on the land and use that to make sure that I can always look down the bearing and see the person. I then put the boat into the autopilot, because what I wanted to do is to head down that bearing line and get the things ready. So up onto the deck to get the boat hook and bring that into the cockpit. Then into the lazarette in order to get the handy billy. It was reasonably close to the top, it isn't always. And then what I should have done at this point was grab the tether, and I didn't, but you'll see how that pans out later.
Slow right down. Let's go past. I can see that he's okay.
Now, one of our assumptions is that we don't get the gear in the water straight away. As we go close to the casualty on the pass, then I would try and get that in there. That will give you some more visual clues. It could be that you can throw a line if the casualty is conscious, they might be able to grab it. And this makes things a little bit easier, but it might not be the case. But at that point, go dead downwind with the main really tight in, and the main's really tight in just in case there is that accidental jibe. If it's tight in, it won't be a big issue.
I can still see him. I've got him lined up with something prominent on the shore.
We turn around and then we come up into the wind, head into the wind, and we look up at the sail and just make sure that we are head to wind, and if we aren't, we can do some manoeuvres at this point while we're still a little bit away in order to get to a position when we get to the casualty we are head to wind. And I am watching this nice and closely. I know you can't see it on the video, but I can just see just appearing above the spray hood now, there is the casualty, fine on the starboard bow, nice slow approach.
Just a second to get this rigged.
I wasn't quite as ready as I would have liked to been, so in the last few minutes of the approach, or last few seconds of the approach, I was getting the handy billy rigged, and it could be that I could go straight to clapping the handy billy on rather than using the tether, but you'll see that. But there's getting into the very close to him, final manoeuvre, turn the boat, in our case to starboard, slow as you like, use the boat hook, grab them, bring them close into the boat, bring them back towards the cockpit, using the boat hook to hold them nice and tight. And then I put the engine off at this point, just in case of the danger of inadvertently knocking the control whilst you're clambering around inside the cockpit. I hadn't quite got the tether ready, so then grabbed it, and then it is a case of clip the tether, or you could actually possibly use the tether of the person if they had it on but not fixed to the boat, but that's a case of keeping the casualty as close to the boat as possible. I then got a few seconds to rig the handy billy. There's a couple of little snap shackles, they just snap straight into the back of the boom. Give myself enough to be able to connect to the casualty itself.
Onto the bucket. Take the safety knife out, cut.
We're then into the business of cutting the guardrails away in order to give yourself a little bit of space to do this, and once that's away, it is a case of being able to hold this up. It would need a handy billy to do this. With a person with full foul weather gear that was soaking wet, there's very little chance of being able to get that body in without some mechanical assistance.
Mayday, mayday, this is Yacht Corrick in position 5440.6 north, 00541.3. Man overboard recovery. Person is conscious but very cold. Request assistance to recover for possible exposure. This is Corrick over.
When Elizabeth and I were reviewing the video, it occurred to us that we might have given the impression that so long as you do all these steps, you'll be fine. And if that's what you take from this, then that's not great, because these are a set of steps that we use as a start point. Every situation is going to be different. The weather conditions are going to be different. You really don't know, and therefore this is just a set of initial actions to set you up, and you will have to modify this as you go. So there's a phrase that no plan ever survives first contact with the enemy, and this is probably true here as well. So we do these sets of steps based on a number of assumptions. So for example, we're assuming that it's dark, we're assuming that it's bumpy, we're assuming that we don't spot the casualty going over the side straight away, and that's our drill. If those assumptions aren't right, or there is something different, then we're going to need to modify it. So, as I say, no plan survives first contact with the enemy, but that isn't a good reason for not having a plan and not rehearsing it, and that's ideally what we're encouraging here.
I hope that and the examples have been useful.
I'd say always wear your life jacket.
I agree, always wear your life jacket. You never get warning of these things happening, and this stuff builds up really quickly. And we're pretty good about tethers. Always at night, always when reefed. Yeah. Well, I hope that's been useful. Thank you very much for watching.
Thank you.
Thank you.